Greetings, Year 10, and welcome to another exciting mathematics class. Today we're going to be looking at bivariate data. Now, bi means two. So when we're talking about bivariate data, we're going to have two numbers that are paired up, and we're going to plot them on what's called a scatter plot. So let's get into it and see what happens. An example of two things we might be doing is comparing height to weight. Or we could be comparing anything, but that's just an example. So you have two different things that are going to be mentioned. And the scatter plot is basically the graph that you put it on, and it will look something like this. Normally you might have dots all over it, or crosses all over it, or whatever it is. So let's get into it. A couple of words we need to be aware of: relationship, correlation, and association. And they're words we use to describe how our two variables, or our two things such as the height and the weight, how they're linked to each other. So let's have a look at some examples here. You'll see this first example on the top left. There are a whole lot of dots, and they appear to be heading in an upward direction, forming pretty much a straight line. So we say there is a positive correlation when it's heading upwards in a line type of shape. And we also say it's quite strong for this one because it's fairly close to a line. Maybe that point is a little bit off, but it's pretty close. When we look at the top right, again, forming a bit of an upward trend, so it's positive. The line's not as obvious, so it's not strong, it's just positive correlation. It's a bit difficult to sometimes tell whether it's strong or positive because it's almost a personal opinion, but we're just using those terms initially. When you look at the bottom left, definitely a correlation heading downwards in a sort of a line type trend if we consider our dots, so that's negative. Is it strong? You might argue it is, but again, that's a hard thing to define because it's an opinion. When we look at the bottom right, there's no real upwards or downwards trend with lines. There's dots just everywhere, so we say there is no correlation. Now, if we have a look at the next picture, you can see there's definitely a correlation. It's not necessarily a line, it's a bit of a curve. But this is the interesting thing. You can have one point that's just way out in the middle of nowhere, and that point is called an outlier. Now, we've had outliers before when we've drawn box plots. And you can have outliers when you're dealing with bivariate data as well. So let's look at an example here. Now, in order to do this example, we're going to have to plot different things. Now, we're comparing x against y. Doesn't matter what x represents and y represents, we're comparing them. So we need an x-axis and a y-axis. And we need to label them. Now, when we look at our x numbers, the biggest number is 17. So if I look along the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can't get up to 17, so I'm going to go up in twos. When I look at the y-axis, I need to get as high as 6.2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, we'll make that. That's fine. So let's label our axes. I'm going to go in twos along the horizontal or the x-axis. And to go on the vertical axis, I'm going to go up in ones. So you'll need to label your axes. Once you've labelled your axes, you are then going to plot the points. So the first point you're going to plot is the point 13 and 2.1. So you go out to 13 and then up 2.1 and you put a mark. Now I'm going to put crosses here. Every little point represents a cross for this particular one. So I go to the second point, 9 and 4. So I go out 9 and up 4 and I put a cross. The next one, out 2, up 6.2, and I put a cross. Next one, out 17 and up 1.3, so out 17, up 1.3, there's my cross. Then we go out 3, up 5.5, put my cross. Then we go out 6 and up 0.9, put my cross. We go out 8 and up 3.5, put my cross, and we go out 15 and up 1.6, out 15 and up 1.6, and we put our cross. and we have finished our scatter plot. Now, if we're going to look at the scatter plot, how would we describe the correlation or the relationship or the link between x and y? Is it positive or is it negative? Well, this point appears to be an outlier, so we're just going to ignore it for the moment. So if we focus on these points here, they appear to be heading in a downward trend, which would make it negative correlation. So we say there's negative correlation for this scatter plot. Part C asks us to describe whether the relationship or the correlation between x and y is strong or weak. Now again, we're going to ignore the outlier. So they all look like they're pretty good in a straight line, so I'm going to call it strong. Strong correlation for this one. And finally, identify any outliers. Well, we can see an outlier there, and that came from going across 6 and up, what was it? 0.9. So our outlier is at 6, 0.9. That's the coordinate or the point. So there you have it. That's how you do a scatter plot and analyze the scatter plot. Time for you to try some questions. Enjoy the experience.